This episode of the podcast is brought to you by the UK's #1 coral selling website, prestigereef.co.uk and reefdork.etsy.com for all your 3D printed aquarium accessory needs. YouTube! Hello, everybody. I'm excited tonight, Ryan.
I can see.
We have
a very passionate topic, don't we, for tonight?
We do. So we're going to be talking about it's coral recovery check. Why corals die? So basically, I realised talking to you before the stream that I've probably slightly mistitled this, but this is basically how to diagnose problems with corals. Okay, so that's the point of this, and the coral recovery checklist is probably the right title, because what I've done, and you've done some homework as well, I've created a list of everything that you should be checking from start to finish if you've got corals that are suffering. Now, if Fan from Tidal Gardens has tuned in, for example, because he's got which he hasn't, because he's got one little coral that's just not doing quite so well, and he's wondering, what the 1 in a million thing that he hasn't considered might be. Stop the video now, because this is not aimed at you. So if you're top end of the hobby and you know everything and you've been in it for years and you're really experienced, you're not going to learn a lot from this video. You might agree or disagree with us. I think you'll probably agree, but you're not going to learn. This is really for, look, if you're relatively new and you're yet to have a really successful reef tank and you're not quite working out, you can't quite work out what's going on, that's who it's aimed at, basically.
What a way to sell the stream to people. Everyone's turning off.
Maybe, but then but to be fair, you can if you want, but people who have been in the hobby for years, I watch streams like this because I'm like, right, let's see if I agree with him, see if he's wrong. And then you go through and you're like, okay. And you tick everything off as you go. So so that's basically the idea, is to help. I'm hoping that this will live streams don't get that many views, but some people might go, you know what, I just can't figure it out. I need to talk it through start to finish. And actually, we get asked quite a lot, don't we? And you see posts on Facebook groups and all this sort of stuff. What's wrong with my coral? And really, what you want to do is you want to be like, okay, I've got 1,000 questions for you. Let's have a two-way conversation. Yeah. And then I'll diagnose it. And that's what this is. Okay, so it's rather than just I'm posting this on Facebook. This is now you're getting the two-way conversation, kind of.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Where would you like to start?
Good. Oh, well, I tell you. So the normal format is we start with week in reefing. I'm thinking about phasing that out because I'm getting a little bit bored of it, to be honest. Because there are times when you're like, Alex, what did you get up to? And I'm like, I topped up my magnesium. And it's like, no one cares. It's boring. So I might phase that out. But if we got, and you said as well, look, the other week, look, not much happens week to week. But if we've got particularly interesting stuff, we'll talk about it. And there's a couple of things I think that I've got to talk about and you have. So you had a couple of things with, I can't remember what it was. Oh, you've got to set up another tank.
Yes, I have another tank. So the first thing I want to say is to actually ask the chat. And also the comment section. Do they? Is it something that they enjoy, or is it something they don't enjoy? And I agree with you. I don't think it needs to be every single week.
Yeah.
But the only other thing is, what would you or they suggest that we fill the time in instead with?
So the thing I think works really well is when we just two reefers just chatting about stuff generally. Yeah. So if there's something that's interesting that's worth talking about, and that does come out of what we've been up to recently. But if it's just we're sitting here listing all this boring stuff.
Yeah.
But by all means, if you've got ideas,
let us know.
Stuff you want to talk about, tell us. Right. But so your new tank, Ryan.
Yes. So I now have another tank. Now, the reason I have another tank is because I set up a second quarantine tank. So I have a 150 litre quarantine tank, which currently has 6 fish in it. And I now have a second quarantine tank, which is only 50 litres. And that is because I found a fish which you don't see very often. And even though I am now, I think, 10 days into the quarantine of the first system, I wasn't willing to restart it and add a fish. I thought I'll let those go, and I'll get a second tank, and I'll start quarantining that fish separately. Now the fish which I have bought is a white tiger goby. You might have seen it on my Instagram. I don't know.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, okay.
So
when you say you don't see them often, you mean you don't get them in shops, and when you get it in your tank, you don't see it very often either.
Exactly. I'm not even joking. Like if someone said to me, "What's your favorite fish?" I naturally the first thing that comes to mind, you'll go, "Oh, like a regal angel or a king eye or whatever." But there has been one fish that has stood the test of time as one of my favorites, and it is a white tiger goby. And I don't know if you can get one up on the screen relatively quickly for people, but you just don't see them that often. And for me, I think they have great personalities, but I think there's more of like the fact that they're really, really secretive. So
someone sent me. I was talking to someone who I know who was sending me pictures. I think he's just bought one of these recently as well.
I think.
Yeah. Coincidentally. Oh, it's maybe there's a few that have come in at the same time or whatever. I don't know. But anyway,
well, the first one that I ever had, which was about probably, I know, 12 years ago, I had it for 7 years, I think, or maybe even longer than that. And at that time, if you type white tiger goby into Google, nothing came up. The only picture that came up was that picture of the fish that came up then. But whereas now you can see there's like loads of people have pitched, so it must have been relatively rare. Okay. And the one I got originally, I think the guy was like, I have no idea what this is. If you want it, you can have it for £5. They're not like that anymore.
No. How much do you remember?
They're like, I think they're like £60 now. They're quite. Okay. They've gone up quite considerably. But that's one of the fish that I love because you don't see it every day, and if you do see it, it's a privilege. You see a yellow tang every day, you get used to it. Whereas if you go, I saw. So my old one was called Jeffrey. So I was like, oh, I saw Jeffrey today, and it could be 3 months between seeing Jeffrey.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think what you actually have is you have this feeling of going, oh, I haven't seen Jeffrey for like, I know, a month or 2 months. Maybe he's dead. And then you see him and you go, oh, he's not dead.
I love that. Yeah.
So that's why I enjoy it so much. But I was thinking today. Oh, sorry.
There's just a couple of interrupt you quickly. There's a couple of suggestions for what we want to talk about. Okay. Jessie Rorobow says she's here to watch Ryan when Alex is talking about new gear.
Yeah.
And Trevor Hillier says he thinks I should make Ryan do weekly equipment reviews.
How has this become a thing? This is not a thing.
It is a thing.
Well, no, it is a thing. It's just not a thing I can help. So
no.
Unfortunately, I don't. When I zone out, don't I? And it's blatantly obvious when I zone out. So if you ever talk to me in person, you now know that happens when people talk to me as well. So it's I'm giving away all my secrets. Anyway
go.
Yes. So I was thinking today, could you have a 6-foot tank with only small fish in it? Like only small fish. So no tanks.
I see. Right.
Just like antheas, nothing bigger than an antheus, basically, like a small, the common antheus you get. I can't remember what they're called.
The squammy pins. What they call. I can't remember what they're. But yeah.
Would it look weird to have a fish?
It would look weird. It would look weird. I think that the two issues you'd have are one, algae, because if you're not going to have a tang or something, because it's funny though, because like in my the tank behind me, the Cade, I don't have obviously. Well, there's no fish in there at the minute. I don't have algae eating fish in there. Before my wipeout, I had 2 clownfish and a shrimp goby, I think. That was it. So nothing that eats algae. And there's never any algae in there. There still isn't now. There's a tiny little patch of hair algae that basically hasn't grown or receded for 6 months, but there's never any algae in there. But in my main tank, within 5 minutes of the fish being removed, going into the hospital tank, algae everywhere. It's like like my lawn.
Okay.
So
I know that algae in theory shouldn't be a problem because Florida Aquarium grow corals to go back into the ocean, and because they grow them to go back into the ocean, they don't have fish with them.
Fish, okay.
Because they said it's an entirely like different biosecurity thing if you add fish. So, and they basically have just loads and loads of snails.
You absolutely can do it. It's just making it a bit more difficult for yourself, I think. And it would look. I think it would look weird. I think small fish in a big tank look cool. Yeah. But if it was just small fish, I don't know.
Because you could have like 100 in a 6-foot tank as opposed to like 12 fish.
If it was like a massive shoal of chromis or whatever, and if you could teach them to actually shoal and not just spread out like they do, then that would be great. But
so that's so I've lost my train of thought now. So basically I've started the second tank, and I think to some extent I think it's a good thing, because that means every 3 weeks I can buy a new fish, basically within reason. Like, because what I can do is I can do quarantine on one, and then once that quarantine is, if it's halfway through, I can put a fish in the other one if it's a small fish, and then and move them over. The other thing that I thought about doing, although I'm not going to go down that route now, was I could move the fish from the quarantine tank that they're in now halfway through, because there's a thing where after 14 days, I think, if you transfer them to a new tank, then there's all the stuff that's fallen off them isn't an issue anymore. So, and then you can just observe them after. I would never do it, but I just wondered if, like, it's not that difficult to transfer them over, is it?
No,
because there's no rocks or anything for them to hide behind. You just put a big net in, you can get them all in one go. So I thought about doing that, but we'll see. Either way, it allows me. You know the pain of wanting a fish that you can't have because you're quarantining your fish. So, and the other reason I bought a 50-litre tank is because it fits inside the 150-litre tank, so it doesn't take up any more room.
That's a good idea. Okay, yeah, I like that. Although you got to be careful because you could smash that very easily.
Yeah, it's the same tank you have basically. I think you got the 100-litre one, didn't you? Yeah,
which is actually, so it's called a Superfish Start 100, but it's actually a 90-litre.
Yeah,
but, whatever.
So I got the one down from that and the one up from that. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's the majority of my week in reefing. I got new corals in last week, and I'm taking pictures and putting them on the website. Loads of them have sold already, to be honest, to local people, which isn't what people want to hear when they're listening remotely. And the other thing is I've got a box of corals coming in on Tuesday. So, and work experience guy is coming again on Wednesday. So the corals arrive Tuesday.
A prestige video.
Yeah, the corals arrive Tuesday. He can then process them on Wednesday, and then hopefully by like the weekend, the ones that are things like torches and stuff where they don't need to heal can be sold. Yeah. So yeah, that's my week in reefing essentially.
It's not called that anymore.
That's my 9 minutes in reefing.
Like it. And we'll try to be relatively quick this week because there's quite a lot to talk about in terms of the headline topic. Okay. So there's a couple of things I got to tell you. So first off, my scarlet hawkfish is going to die basically. So for the last few days, it's in quarantine. For the last few days, it's just like it's been breathing like this, just like panting effectively.
Yeah.
And it's kind of lost a little bit of its colour, which happens when it's stressed, and it won't eat. I've got no idea what's wrong with it. I've stripped out all of the copper, or most of the copper anyway, because I wondered if maybe it was having a bad reaction. But no change, and I've got a nasty feeling I'm going to go downstairs one day and just find him. He's dead. It might be a couple of weeks because he still looks okay. He doesn't look thin or anything, but going without food for a few days is one thing. Going without food for a week or two is a problem. So if he doesn't start eating soon, he's gone.
So you've taken all the copper out of your tank?
Most of it, yeah.
So you essentially have to start the quarantine again, I assume.
Yeah. So I need to. Do
you know
for various
what I like?
reasons.
Do you know what I like from hearing that? You are doing what needs to be done. Rather than going, I'm going to leave the copper in, and the fish either survives or doesn't survive. You've gone, you know what? Even though I'm 2 weeks into quarantine, the other fish are doing okay. I'm going to take the copper out and I'm going to start again. That's the right thing to do.
I was actually thinking about calling a vet.
Right?
Yeah, I don't. The trouble is, if it was something that I could see that I could tell was wrong with it, then there might be something else I can do about it. But because I've got literally no idea, could be a parasite, could be something else. I've got no idea. I don't think there's anything like that a vet could do, to be honest.
Yeah.
So that's a silly thought, really, for a small fish like that. But I've had him 6 years, and he's cool. So
you get attached to it. But some people think they're just fish, but you get attached to them, and I know you get attached to them because they came to me. That's how attached you were to them.
Yeah, exactly.
And weirdly, I became attached to them.
You really was it the blenny? Oh no, it was the Scarlet Hawk, wasn't
Oh
it?
yeah, it was
Really
the
nice.
Scarlet
Yeah,
Hawkfish I like so much. I went and bought my own Scarlet Hawkfish.
yeah. But so I don't know. I'm hoping that he might come round. I'm just going to keep feeding, and he's not getting bullied or anything. But
Have you spoken to Humblefish?
no,
If you
that's a
message
good
him,
shout.
he'll reply.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I believe he'll reply. I can't guarantee it, but yeah, he's the sort of person who he replies to every post pretty much, both on Facebook or on the forums. So he'll definitely come back to you if you get him in the right place.
Okay, will do. And then the other thing is so I've had a couple of I've had a few. Reef Dork Extra is exploding at the moment. So I've currently got there was a video on Friday, and I have videos. Hang on. What have I got? Yeah, 3. I've got 3 next week, the weekend after that, and the week after that. I've got videos scheduled, already uploaded, ready to go. So I've never had that. I've never been more than a week in advance on YouTube. So I've got 3 videos all lined up to go out, and it's all 2 of them. One of them is a Deltec UV sterilizer, which is wicked, but it's not cheap. It's quite expensive. And the other 2 are budget things though. So I did on Friday. I did the Jecod DMP40, which is the equivalent of the MP40, and that's really what I want to talk about. And the other 2 things are a Nicrew Hyper Reef Light, which that's going to be a sponsored video. When I do the review, it's a sponsored. They're paying me to make that video.
Yeah.
But when I got it, I was like, you know what, it'll be okay. Some people talk of it quite well. Why not? Okay, I'll do it. And then when I got it, I was like, this is actually really good. It's much more impressive than I thought it was going to be. So I did an unboxing, which isn't sponsored because it didn't ask me to do that. But I've kind of got a relationship with them, so make of that what you will. But anyway, it's actually really good. It's quite impressive. So that's going up as well. And I bought a Bubble Magus filter roller, which I've had installed on my K tank for a couple of weeks, and that is going up as well. And that's actually really good. It's basic, but for the money, it's very good.
What makes it impressive? The Nicrew light, or are you going to make me watch the video?
You're not going to watch the video. So stupid thing like the packaging. So I did an unboxing of the Jecod DMP40, which I'll come on to this week, and just the box looks a bit crap. It's got a load of different languages on it. It just looks like no one in marketing has touched that. Someone very practical has gone, oh, that'll do. Like the colours look faded, and the box was all beat up to hell. It's just a bit rubbish. And then when you open it up, like it's all a bit like quality's okay, I suppose. It's all right, nothing special. With the Hyper Reef, the Nicrew, the box is amazing. It looks like if you put that on a shelf next to a Radion, you'd be like, yeah, which is the professional brand? Don't know, they both are. Even the instructions. So the instructions in the Jecod thing, like some of the language isn't great. It's like they've put it into Google Translate.
Yeah.
And I love Jecod, don't get me wrong, and I'll be doing a review on it. I've got high hopes for the DMP40, but the language is awful. Whereas the Nicrew one is really professionally put together. They're based in Hong Kong, which has got obviously a former British colony, and I think they've kind of got a better presence. I get the feeling that it's kind of like Chinese mainland is just, it doesn't have the kind of the English connection. I think do you see what I'm trying to say? So they understand English perhaps better. I don't know what it is. I don't know if that's what it is, but it's much more professional. It looks like a Western brand. If you told me they were European or American, I'd believe you based on that. And the build quality isn't fantastic. It's definitely cheaper than the main lights, but it's actually pretty good still. And there's all sorts of things they've thought about with frosting of the LED cover. Anyway, you're glazing over now, but it's just, I was surprised.
I am glazed over. I can see your excitement. So, you know,
I'm excited because I thought, like, I watched back both of my videos, the Jecod one and the Nicrew one, and my average face for the Jecod review is, it's all right, it's fine.
Yeah.
And my average face for the Nicrew was, like pleasantly surprised. Basically, it's not amazing. It's not up there with Ecotech, but it's pretty good.
Okay. Well, you wanted to talk about the other one, didn't you? The Jecod.
The Jecod, yeah. So the Jecod is, oh man, people are really excited about the Jecod online. Okay, because as soon as you post anything, you get 100 comments. Yeah, just instantly like just really latching onto anything you say, and it's generated a lot of buzz, and there's loads of people making videos about it. Everyone's excited because this has been coming for a long time. The MP40 is, like, I think it's, from what I understand, it's the best selling pump, more or less in the world, certainly of the more expensive ones, and no one's been able to come up with a cheaper equivalent, a copy effectively.
Yeah.
And now it has, so people are excited about it. But like, I posted a photo of, I had a problem with, it said under voltage or something. The app said I was getting low voltage. But I posted it. I wasn't like posting it saying, "Oh, this is rubbish." I was posting it with a question: does this mean I've got the wrong power supply? Yeah. And actually, I did have a couple of people contact me to give me some advice on it, which I think it'll be okay. But like, I posted it in various places, and some people were like, "Oh my god, I told you it was rubbish," and just like latching onto everything. And it's like, just wait for a second. At that point, I'd had it turned on for like 2 minutes. It's like, just hang on, this isn't a review. But and every way,
why people care so much about.
But people really care, and it's not just on my post. Everywhere I see, everyone's got an opinion, and it's funny because it seems to be quite polarizing. Some people are saying, "Oh, it's awful, it's cheap rubbish, it's crap," and other people are saying it's better than the better than the Vortex, and it's the best thing ever. It's like, it seems to be, you're either on Team Jekod or you're dead to me, sort of thing.
Well, I can assure you, I'm not on either, because it makes me feel nothing. I don't feel, oh, one day I'll get one of those, that'll be exciting, or they shouldn't have done that. I don't feel anything at all, because it's a pump. And anyone who gets really excited about pump, you need some more exciting things in your life.
That is true. That's the way you should approach it. Yeah. So it's got this weird under voltage thing, but to be honest, the app, I don't like the app. It's actually quite impressive for a Jekod app, but I don't really like the Jekod apps generally. It's just a bit fiddly. Although I only just started using it, so I'm not writing it off.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, with Jekod stuff, I just use the control box. So I might just get rid of the app, because the app is the thing that's telling me it's under voltage.
Yeah.
I'm going to plug in a power monitor to see if actually how much it's drawing, and if that's fine, I can just ignore the app and set it on random or whatever. Because
I saw people had said, "Oh, I didn't have that problem with when I used mine." And I thought, wow, if that is a problem, it couldn't have gone to a worse person for the first time of this problem to show up. If you see what I mean.
Well, I think it couldn't have gone to a better person, because I'll talk about it, and I won't just say, "Oh, look, I've got this problem. It's terrible. Don't buy it. It's cheap crap."
Yeah.
I'll talk you through it, and I'm not just going to go one off. I'll work it out. I'll figure out the problem. I'll fix it, and then I'll say, look. And actually, one thing I have noticed is lots of people have different experiences. So there are some people who get the plug. Mine came with an Australian plug, and so it came with an adapter, and the adapter it looks like it's burned my house down. So that went in the bin. But then other people were like, "Oh no, I got a UK plug." And there's lots of little things that are just different, and that's like, you wouldn't get that with a Vortex, for example.
Different people are getting charged a different amount as well, aren't they? Based on the tax, I think.
In the UK, so you have to pay import duty on anything over 135 quid that's not from Britain, basically. And some people, I don't know about that though, because I got charged. I think I paid 150 quid for it, and I got charged 39 quid or in import duties, something like that. And I've seen other people, the price varies on AliExpress depending on what link you click.
Yeah.
But I've seen some people say they pay different rates of import duty. Some people say I didn't pay any import duty. And those people, I think, don't get too excited, because I've bought loads of things since Brexit where it comes through. I bought an exhaust pipe a while ago that was 600 quid, and it got I didn't have to pay any import duties when it arrived. I was like, yes, because I was like, that's going to be 100 quid. So I was really chuffed. 2 months later, I got an invoice.
Same thing happened to me.
They find you.
Yeah, they do.
But to be anyway, there's just, everybody has different experiences, and this is the kind of thing. And because this is brand new out, I think I feel like you need to wait a year before you actually see how it's actually going to be, because you're always going to have these weird little differences in the early stages and teething problems. When I first turned mine on, it didn't work. So
really?
It made this horrible noise and then stopped. I was like, that's weird. So I took it out, took the wet side apart, didn't see anything wrong with it, put it back together, and it was working. So okay, fine. But you don't want these initial immediate, you don't want to latch onto these immediate, just one post about it. You want to just say, okay, just what I'm going to try to do is use it for a week or two, and then I'll report back on it. But yeah, it's funny. Everybody's really excited about it.
Well, keeps people talking, doesn't it? Gives people something to do.
Indeed. But yeah, so it's. I think actually it's going to be, my overall impression is going to be good. It's not going to wean me off Vortex. I think Vortex are objectively better.
Yeah.
But for the money, it's really good value. And if you can't afford a Vortex, or you're a bit more price sensitive, or you don't think there's value for money, then it's a really good option. So, but I'll reserve judgment because I've had it
It
up
was
for a day.
interesting because I saw you post something on Instagram, and it was of the flow of it, and you said this is the flow in a 6-foot tank, and I thought actually that looks impressive, but I had no comparison. So if you put an MP40 next to it, was it equal, better,
So
worse?
I tried to do that. That was a 60-second clip.
Yeah.
And the flow before I put some Red Sea Reef Energy in because it's bright and you can see it. Before I put that in, the flow didn't look that impressive. I was like, it's doing okay. It's a big tank. It's only one pump. Everything else was turned off. But then you put that in, and suddenly you realise it's going all over the place. It's actually quite impressive. I then tried to do a 60-second clip of my MP40. So I turned the Jekyll off and just put the MP40 on constant speed, 100%.
Yeah.
But the app kept messing me around. So every time, so I'd do it on the app, set it for half an hour, and then I'd go and set the camera up. 10 seconds later, it's gone back to the previous mode, so it's not doing 100% anymore. And it's like So I couldn't.
Isn't there like
a
live mode or something that you can do? Where
that's what I was trying to do, a demo. Yeah, but it would anyway. I just gave up. I was like, you know what, I can't be bothered with this. I just wanted to post. This isn't like it's not that deep. I just wanted to get something on Instagram. I was like, you know what, I can't do it. So I'll put that in the main video when I've got time to do it. But the flow looks all right. From looking at it, 100% on the MP40, the Vortex looked stronger than 100% on the Jekod, but they're at slightly different heights, so it's a little bit difficult to tell. But I think my initial impression after 60 seconds, so don't pay any attention to this. My initial impression was that the Jekod wasn't quite as powerful as the MP40, but still pretty decent.
What about the sound? Because
really
sound
quiet
is the thing that's important to me.
Can put 100% agree. So really, that's the one thing. I don't have my MP40s turned up. I never have them above 80, even on my 4-foot SBS tank, because they get really noisy then. And even at 80, they're a little bit like, so I don't tend to do that.
Mine aren't like that. Mine literally they're on 100% at the moment because there's no core in there, so I'm just move everything around. But they're on 100%, and I mainly want to blow everything off the rocks, but they're in nutrient transport mode, so it's not like long, powerful pulses. So maybe that's the reason that
when I've had them on pulse, it goes and you can hear them. But the Jekod, and actually to be fair, when I put it on a constant, 100% constant, it was noisy, whereas the Jekod on 100% constant was really quiet, not silent, but it was quiet. But this is not a fair comparison because the Jekod is brand spanking new, and all of my Vortex are old. Some of them are 7-8 years old. I've swapped the wet sides around, so it's difficult to give a true comparison. But my Jekod, my Vortex, they're quiet, but it's because I don't run them at high percentages. And when I've run them at high percentages before, on pulse mode particularly, they get a bit noisy. So, but anyway,
John's just said, I don't fancy a power head with suction cups instead of a magnet. So do they have suction cups
as well
as a magnet?
As well
yeah, I was going to say, I thought they had both.
They do, yeah. So if it was just suction cups suck. Well, literally, suction cups are no good. But they've got suction cups and a magnet.
Yeah.
So if it was just suction cups, I'd be completely with you. But they've come with magnets as well, and the magnets, it grips fine on my tank, and my tank is 19 mil glass, and my Vortex, that's at the limit of what they're supposed to be able to grip on. They still do grip, but it's.
What do the suction cups do? If there's a magnet,
what's the purpose
of the suction cups?
They just help because the magnets push the suction cups in as well. So it's just, I don't know how much difference it makes, but it probably adds 10% grip strength basically, or whatever, Okay. So it's a nice idea. And those anyway, let's not go into that. I've got the unboxing. If you want to go and find out what I've learned, watch that. And if you want to be patient, wait 2 weeks and I'll do a proper video where I'll cover everything, and then I'll tell you everything you need to know.
Sounds good.
Okay, coral recovery checklist 2936. Coral recovery checklist starts here. So what I'm going to do, you and I talked briefly before the stream, and we've basically covered most of the same things. But what I've written down a list of the stuff more or less in order of the things you need to understand.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go through that, and I want you to chime in with basically with anything. And then when we get to the end, if I've missed anything or if there's anything else you want to add in, chuck it in. And I think actually we're both mostly on the same page because we have a similar philosophy to reefing. All right. So first thing, how long has your tank been running? Okay, because people often post on Facebook or forums or whatever saying my coral's dying, what's wrong with it? And they just post one photo of the coral, and then when they post a photo later of the whole tank, the tank's brand new. So if your tank's under a few months old, doesn't mean you can't add corals, but things do go funny in the first few months of a tank. So if you're less than a few months old, just stop adding corals completely and just let it settle for a bit. It doesn't mean that, and I add corals from day one. It doesn't mean you can't, but just you're asking for trouble basically. So if it's brand new, just wait. Just give it a couple of months.
I completely agree, and I think the main reason with new tanks is nutrients. That's the main reason. So I didn't cycle the coral farm at all. I started with corals on day one, but I had to dose nutrients on day one. There were no fish in there.
I remember,
the biggest problem with the water box has always been nutrient issues. The dinoflagellates, nutrients, cyano, nutrients. When the nutrients bottomed out, killed the corals. So I thought to myself today, why did I not put more fish in from the very beginning? Why did I not do that? And
you don't want to put too many fish in because you want the bacteria to establish properly, don't you?
But what I mean is I've had the tank a long time now, so over that time I could have added a lot more fish. And it would have solved the low nutrient problem.
But that's the thing, you get nutrients all over the place, and then suddenly you'll get outbreaks of all sorts of stuff, and then that messes with everything else. And then if you get dinos can be toxic to certain creatures like snails and that sort of stuff. So just if it's early doors, maybe even the first 6 months, just back off a bit, off and just leave, because it will come good. You just need to leave it. And a really good sign that your tank is ready for LPS corals is if you're getting coralline growth. If you're getting coralline, happy days, crack on. Doesn't mean if you're not getting doesn't mean that if you're not getting coralline.
Are you joining me? Yeah.
Doesn't mean if you're not getting coralline you can't add corals, but that's just if you've got coralline, that's a really good sign.
Did you just send Mrs. Reef Dork out to go get you a beer? Because
she literally drove to the shop.
Is that true? Because earlier when I said I'm going to have a drink tonight, you went, I haven't got anything in. Your wife is a legend.
There you go, Laura. So if it's early doors, just chill out a bit. Just don't worry. If you're having problems, that's not you. It's just what happens. So that's the first thing to think about. The second thing, there are a couple of pieces of equipment, Ryan, that are essential to get right. But this is not my deep, in-depth review of the Jik DMP40. This is just the real basics, and this is not really about equipment. This is about water chemistry. So you're not going to hear any brand names now. Do you have an auto top off? You want to ask yourself. If you don't, get one. It's absolutely essential. You can get away without one briefly, but your salinity will be all over the place because you'll forget to top it up every now and then, or you'll top it up, but you'll do too much or not enough or whatever. So just get an auto top off. It will make the world of difference.
They are life-changing. Literally life-changing.
They really are. Yeah, completely. It doesn't matter what brand you get. They can be a little bit expensive, £100 or so, or maybe even more, but you just have to have one. That's just so good. So if you don't have one, and salinity, if your salinity's out, it ruins everything. And corals hate swinging salinity. So get yourself an auto top off. Why are you laughing?
Because Jay keeps mentioning that I'm drinking champagne. So the only reason I'm drinking champagne is because we had champagne yesterday, and there was one glass left, and I thought, well, I'm good. I'll drink it tonight. I might as well drink it with you. So
there we go. This is a great idea from Polymate 3D, by the way. This live stream is a drinking game. If you disagree, you got to drink.
Sounds good to me.
Or if you agree, you got to drink. All right. So you need an auto top off. Just get an auto top off. If you don't have one, it will make your life easier and everything will be happier.
Yeah.
The other thing, if you're dosing, right? If you're not dosing, you might be able to get away with it briefly. But you should probably be, if you're adding corals, you're going to need to start dosing pretty soon.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not doing large water changes. So get a dosing pump. another piece of equipment. It doesn't matter what the brand is, but you'll do the same thing as with auto top off. You'll be like, oh, I'll dose some today, and then you'll forget, and then 2 weeks later it's like, oops, I haven't dosed anything at all, and then you dose too much to make up for it. And so it's just corals like it when it's all nice and steady.
Yeah.
So get a dosing pump as well and dose. But if you're going to do that, you got to be testing. Don't just dose randomly. Got to be
100%.
testing your parameters, and parameters are that's basically everything. So we'll come back onto that. And the other two things that you need in terms of equipment to get right, and again, don't care what brand you go for, are lighting and flow. So with light, and this is one of the things you were talking about, no matter what light you've got, the temptation is when you get a brand new shiny light, especially if you paid a lot of money for it, you turn it on, you put it on to 100%, and it looks amazing because it's so bright, and your corals look awesome because they're completely enveloped in this like completely covered in light. They look fantastic. The fish look amazing. You don't want to run any light 100% ever, pretty much. So if you've got a par meter, great, test the par. If you can borrow one, great, test the par. But you don't need that. There are loads of videos. BRS did loads of videos with Randy when he was around still, that said they'd set up a Kessel or a Red Sea or an Ecotech, whatever light it was, and they'd show what the intensity was. And so you can roughly work out, well, if it's 100% and the par is 300, then I should run it at 30% and I'll get 100 par. So, but as a rough rule, I reckon any light you've got, just 30%.
Yeah, I think 40 is what I run the farm, and I run those low. Were you around when LEDs first came out?
They were. So when I got my first tank, LEDs were relatively new, but the adoption had been quite high. People had been using them for a while.
No, I was around at the very, very beginning, and it was literally the Wild West. You had no idea. They gave you a light, you had no idea what you were doing. I think AI Souls were one of the first ones from Aqua Illumination.
Yeah, okay.
But the only way to find out what your settings were, because no one thought of par meters back then, it wasn't like a regular thing that people recommended. You had to go onto a forum and see what everyone else had done and see if their stuff was dying or not. And that was how it was done.
Yeah, so funny.
But renting a par meter can massively help if you're not sure.
You don't need to, and it does. If it's one of those things that feels complicated, if you're new to the hobby, it's not actually. It's really easy, and you might think, I don't want to spend the 50 quid. It's well worth it. You don't have to. But the other thing that actually, I've done this a few times. If you buy a Senai Reef, which is a par meter, you can buy one on eBay secondhand, and they're normally half price or less. And then you can sell it, and the chances are you're going to get the same money or more or less. So it will only cost you a tenner because you don't need them really beyond day one. But so if you don't want to use a par meter, that's fine. Just run your lights at 30%. Because if you're not giving your corals enough light, they'll be fine. If you're giving them too much light, they'll die, basically.
Correct.
So getting light right is, and I don't care about the spectrum. I don't unless you're doing something weird. Like if there's a template in the light, if you've got a Radion, use whatever template it comes with, like the AB plus or whatever. Just use a template and set it to 30%. If you're doing something really weird with your spectrum, then it might be a problem. But if you've got the spectrum slightly wrong, it won't matter at all. The corals will adapt. So forget spectrum. And if you're looking, going, I wonder if I need to, because some people say, corals grow more under blue light or corals grow more under white light. It doesn't matter, right? For the purposes of this conversation, it doesn't matter at all. You can start looking at that 2 or 3 years down the line when your tank is thriving and you're trying to get a little bit more yellow out of the coralite on your latest aquapora. But for now, forget spectrum. As long as you're not doing anything crazy, you're just using a template, 30% intensity roughly. Doesn't matter what brand you get. Any of the main companies are fine, roughly 30%, and then you're okay. And if you can't find a template, copy someone experienced. There are loads of people on YouTube. Make sure they're experienced, because some people just upload a video on YouTube. They don't know what they're doing. No offense, Ryan. And they'll have their lighting schedule. But there are loads of people like, I don't know, Coral Euphoria or whatever, who will say they have a Radion whatever, and they'll say, this is my lighting spectrum. This is what I have as. So copy someone experienced if you can, but just make sure you don't go, even if they've got their lights at 100%, you don't want 100%. It's very rare that you would have lights at 100%. And lights will last longer if it's 100% as well. So,
great.
Water changes. Oh no, flow. Sorry, the last piece of equipment, power head. Again, I don't care if it's a Jecod or a Vortec. Doesn't matter what it is. you must have a power head. And there are times I've seen some small tanks that get away without a power head with just a return pump. And might you be able to get away with it? Maybe. But the whole point of this conversation today really is, look, if you're not doing these things, start doing them.
Yeah.
And because these are the basics that you should be doing, and things outside of that might work, but really you want to make sure you're doing this first. So might you get away without a power head on a very small tank of 10 gallons, 40 litres? Maybe. You're still better off with one. But just always get a power head. Ideally 2 opposite each other. They don't have to be 100% again, but just a couple of power heads, because flow is just so important for corals.
It is, but this is something that comes up on the consultations all the time. People are terrified their flow is wrong. Generally speaking, 2 power heads, one on one side of the tank, one on the other side of the tank, that will do.
Yep.
The flow becomes a problem when you have a really full tank and all the corals are blocking each other out. But remember, most people that I do the consultations with are beginners.
Yeah.
So one on one side, one on the other, and you're pretty much fine. Completely. People literally, they literally go, look, can you look at my torch? Is it flowing enough? And it's like, it's fine.
I had a comment the other day that from someone who said, I can't remember exactly what they said, but they were worried about the flow affecting their torch coral.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, for a start, I can't. They were worried it was getting too much flow. I was like, well, I can't see it, so I can't judge it. If it's getting battered, then okay, fair enough. If it looks like the flesh is about to tear off it, fine. But if you know what the ocean's like, it's strong. So don't worry too much about giving it too much flow. But this one person, he was adamant that his corals needed a break. And he was like, look, I want to set a schedule. So, and I don't know if you were talking about having them turned off overnight or whatever. I was like, no. Always 24/7. Never turn your power heads off. Maybe if you want to put your hands in the tank or something for 5 minutes, but never, ever turn your power heads off.
Yeah.
And even don't give your corals a break. They don't need it. They're fine. So always have just a couple of power heads. That's it. If you haven't got power heads, get a power head. And don't worry too much. Like when the first time I bought an MP10 was my first power head, and I spent ages going, oh, which flow pattern do I want it on? And I need to cycle it between this flow pattern for 3 hours and then that one for 6 hours. And I was like, actually, do you know what? I need to get the MP10 because that's got better flow patterns. That's got more random. Yeah. And the reality is, get a Jecod for 50 quid. Just put it on random. It will do the exact same job. Your coral does not care if you've got a Vortec MP40 that costs 400 quid or a 30 quid Jecod that is tiny. So
my original power heads were, I think, 8,000 liters an hour or something, and there was just one constant flow. That's what everyone had. That was the only option. This was before the MP40s were out.
Yeah.
That was, well, I don't know if the MP40s were out. They certainly weren't in my budget at the time. Remember, I started with literally nothing. I was 18 at the time, doing on a literal shoestring, like the tiniest budget. So I got my power sent over, I think, from China, and they were like probably 40 quid at the time. But they only did one. It was just a constant stream of flow
permanently on.
Yeah, and that was it. But it worked. It worked for what I needed.
And to be fair, you can still get those. I've got one of those for my quarantine tank, and it oxygenates the tank. That's it. You need one that creates a bit of a flow pattern.
Yes, yeah.
But it doesn't matter. The point I'm making is, don't worry if you've got an MP40 and you've got it set on nutrient transport mode throughout the day, and then you see someone else who said, "Oh, I've got mine set on Reef Crest random." It's not making a difference. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
You just need a couple of power heads. That's it. But you do need power heads. So if you haven't got power heads, get one. And this whole list, the whole point of this is you're not going to find one thing where you're like, that's what's causing it. It's all of these. And if you're not doing all of them, you need to start doing them, basically.
Yeah.
So we've done with the setup, basically. So establishing your tank, the basic equipment that you need, light, auto top off, power heads. That's it, basically. Dosing pump. Then, are you doing water changes? And again, there are times with things like this, you'll find someone, Mogsy, for example, he had a banging Red Sea Reef for 350, hadn't done water changes for about 2 years or something like that, swore by it and said, and it looked really good. He's had the results to back it up. So every now and then you'll find someone, whether it's on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, forums or whatever, who says, I don't do water changes, and they swear by it. That's the exception. Okay. So if you're not doing them, do them, because you can get away without it, and it can work well for some people. But 99%, you want to be in the 99% of people. You're not the 1% who's special.
Yeah.
So just start doing water changes and think.
Did he start with no water changes? Is the question I want to know. Because people, established tanks are usually okay with no water changes. It's the ones where you try and start from the beginning, I think people struggle with. When I say usually okay, I mean the no water change tanks have usually been established for a period of time, having done lots of changes. David
I would still,
he doesn't do changes on his tank.
Do you not? I thought he did.
No, he doesn't. He said the other day that I think it's been 2 years. He does ICP tests.
Well, he's got 10,000 gallons or whatever. So
yes, that's what I mean.
and quite a large budget, I suspect. But yes, even then, so I still do. I did my 6-year-old tank. I did 10% water changes every week still, 6 years old. But yeah, so making sure you're doing water changes, but ask yourself where you're getting the water from.
Yeah.
If you're making it yourself with an RODI filter, fantastic. You have saved yourself a load of cash, and you've got control over your water quality, which is really important. If you're buying it from, and make sure you're changing your filters. If you haven't changed your filters for 3 years, you need to change them regularly.
Yeah.
So just a simple TDS meter will tell you if you've got anything in your water or not. But if you're buying it from your local fish shop, ask them what the TDS is. Most marine specialist shops will tell you the total dissolved solids, i.e. what's in the water apart from H2O, is 0 or maybe 10 parts per billion or whatever. If it's around that level, that's fine. But every now and then you'll find that you're buying it from a shop that doesn't sell RODI, they just sell RO.
Yeah.
And RO is fine for a tropical tank, it's not fine for a reef tank. And then you ask them and they'll say, oh, it's 100 TDS. And at that point, you know where your problems are coming from.
Yeah.
So just make sure you're getting good quality source water. I'm not saying that all shops are terrible. They're not at all. But every now and then you might come across a shop that isn't trying to sell you 0 TDS water, and they just don't mention it. So, ask. So yeah, you're doing water changes. 10% once a week, don't sweat it. If it's 9%, that's fine. If it's 13%, that's fine. But try to do it every week. If you miss a week, your tank isn't going to collapse. But try to do roughly once a week. Then, and this is the stuff, we're coming on to water parameters, but we still haven't got to water parameters. And water parameters is basically everything. But these are all the other things you need to think of first before you get to that. What are you, and this is Ryan's favorite thing, what are you putting in the tank?
Yes.
So the things you are allowed to put in the tank are fish food, calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium, i.e. dosing, a 2-part dosing. But if you're doing that, you've got to make sure you're testing those. Don't just pour them in randomly.
Salt water.
Salt water with water changes. That's it. If you're putting anything else in apart from food and 2-part dosing, you're in trouble. And that includes, go on.
No, look, not necessarily true, because there'll be people here going, actually, I'm putting Nopox in to deal with my nitrate issue. But interesting. I'm intrigued by why you made that noise.
Well, because this is like the to make sure you're doing all the right things. So I'll come back onto Nopox in a sec.
Yeah.
But I kind of include that.
Okay.
But so the things that you're not allowed to put in are amino acids, iodine, manganese, little bottles of various trace elements, coral food, bacteria, which is less of an issue, phytoplankton, and anything like that, basically.
Yeah.
It's not that they don't do good things. Okay. In the right hands, fantastic. And there are certain tanks, Jay's Real Reef, who's in the chat now, he doses phytoplankton. I think he doses things like iodine as well, various things. A small tank, 100-litre tank, his tank looks amazing. Okay. I'm not saying they don't work. I'm just saying that you don't actually need to do that. So loads of people who have successful tanks don't touch any of that. So that's the cherry on top of the icing on the cake. So if you're doing all these basic things, great. If you're thinking my coral's sulking, it must be because I watched a video that said Zoas like iodine, so I'm dosing iodine. No, that's not it.
Basically, don't put things in that you can't test for. So if you're not testing the iodine, don't put it in. Because there is I think how it's come across might be coming across the wrong way. Because there'll be people going, actually, I did an ICP test and it says I should dose iodine. But interesting. Come on.
No. So I'll cut ICP is on the list later. if you're doing an ICP test and you're
Yeah.
messing around with all these little, you're starting to think, oh, I'm going to add a little bit of this, 2 milliliters of that, and 1 milliliter of this. That's the wrong. You're doing it wrong. And this is not because it's not because ICP test is a waste of time or they'll give you bad results.
Yeah.
It's because if you're doing all of the things that we're talking about, then you're allowed to start doing ICP tests and dosing trace elements.
I think how this is coming across is that people shouldn't be doing that, but that's not what you're saying. You're saying if you have a problem with your corals, stop doing all of these things that are not essential.
Yeah.
And then start to focus on these key. As I said, I think it might be coming across the wrong way. I want to make sure people get what you're saying.
Completely. So this is the purpose of this is these are the things that you should be doing and the things you shouldn't be doing. If you strip everything back and you're following everything that we're saying in this, brilliant. If you've still got problems after all of this, fine. Then you can, or if your tank's thriving but you want to tweak X, Y, and Z, fine. You can move on to the quirky stuff. But that is not going to be your problem.
Oh, Jay's just chimed in. He says
Phyto is a must if you ask me. No.
It's like a YouTuber fight.
but the point is, so the reason I'm not saying that Phyto isn't good. It's good in certain situations.
Yeah.
But if you start pouring things into your tank to try to fix problems, that phytoplankton won't fix a problem. Will it make your reef healthier if everything else, if all these other things that we're talking about are spot on? Yeah, maybe. But if you've got a problem, if your coral's dying, it's not because your light is not blue enough, or it's not because you're not feeding amino acids or phytoplankton or whatever. So I'm not saying that those things aren't important in some situations. I'm just saying if your tank is knackered and you can't work it out, don't mess around with those things. And because you can get into a habit and you're like, okay, I'll put phytoplankton in and then I'll put live food in. And actually, if I'm putting live food in, I'll put some amino acids in because BRS said that they're really good. And it's like, well, they did, but that's based on you getting everything else right. So if your salinity is 42 parts per thousand, I don't care how much phytoplankton you pour in or amino acids, it's not going to do good. So I'm not saying that those things aren't good. It's just if you've got problems, stripping all that nonsense out is a good thing. And then in a year's time, when you're back on track, you can start introducing them again. And when you've got everything right, but this is the core, the basics of the hobby. So if you're doing those other things,
I completely agree with you. So I know what you're trying to say. I
appreciate you clarifying it. I appreciate that.
So
okay. So you're not allowed to pour stuff in. You did say no pox.
Yes.
And the reason I went at no pox, because carbon dosing, it's another thing that carbon dosing is a little bit risky. Really, you don't need to be dosing no pox or any kind of carbon dose. Again, doesn't matter what brand it is, Tropic Marine, Red Sea, whatever, it doesn't matter. You don't really need to be doing that. If you've got a skimmer and you're doing water changes and maybe a phosphate reactor, a skimmer and a phosphate reactor is all the filtration you ever need on pretty much any tank. There are other filters that you can have instead or as well. I like the fleece filters. There are various other things you can do. I dose lanthanum chloride on my tank.
Yeah.
There are various things you can do. But if you've got a skimmer and a phosphate reactor, you're quids in. That will control your nitrate and phosphate for a fact. So you don't need to be dosing Nopox or other things like that. It can do it. But my experience in particular with things like carbon dosing is really good at pulling out nitrates, terrible at pulling out phosphate.
Yes. Yeah.
Or if you put in too much, it strips them both out completely. And so if you're dosing something like that, a carbon dosing product to control nitrate and phosphate, it's very easy to think, I've been testing for 4 weeks every week. It's okay. I'll test again in a month. And then you test in a month and it's 0. And suddenly you're like, oh God, everything's bottom. So that's why I'm a bit cautious of those sorts of things.
It's more to control a problem that's got out of hand than what you need on a day-to-day basis, is what you're saying. So I don't use it on the farm, which is it's interesting. I used it on my 1,000-litre tank for years and years and years. I used it for, but I was feeding very heavily that tank, whereas I don't feed the farm particularly heavily. So that's saves me money.
There you go. And if in the short term, if you've got really high phosphate, you're likely to be testing regularly for a month or so until you get it down. So but just don't, that's complicating it too much. A skimmer and a phosphate reactor will control your nutrients, no problem. It might mean a little bit of effort because you've got to pour in the right amount of phosphate media. How do you work that out? Well, you pour in some, you test. If your phosphate's still going up, you pour in a bit more, you test again. If your phosphate's going down, you don't pour in so much, So rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
So you're not allowed to pour anything of those in. So if you're doing all of those things so far, excellent, well done. Your tank is good. That doesn't mean you're not having problems, because now we're on to the big thing. And this is everything. Those are the fundamentals, really, that you must make sure you're doing those right. Okay. Most people probably are, but there'll be plenty of people who aren't, because you don't actually always know what you need to do. So those are the basics you must do. Parameters. You need to be testing your water. I know. I'm sorry. I don't make the rules. Sorry.
Every
it sucks.
week. Every single week.
Yeah. And write them down, because so that's one thing I've got, is that if you test once and you haven't tested for 6 months or whatever, that's half a job. You need to be testing. Really, you need, if you haven't tested for 6 months, it's okay, but just test every week for 4 weeks, and then you've got a good idea. Because if you test once, it's like an MOT. It tells you what's wrong with your car at that exact point in time. The next day it could blow up for So you need to be testing regularly, and really, sometimes it slips. Sometimes you might go a week or two without testing, or even a month maybe, but try to test every week. And the things that you need to be testing, and these are the things that I think that essentially you need to be testing regularly. And I'm also going to read out the parameters that I think you should aim for. So if your water parameters are outside of these ranges, and you're sitting there thinking, oh, my Duncan's dying, I don't know why, it might be because of this, as long as you've checked all those other things we've talked about so far. Temperature, easy. 25 degrees. I've actually put 24 to 26, which is 75 to 79 Fahrenheit. So, if you want to have a bit of a variance, fine. But anything outside of that, just try to keep it in that range, because there'll be times when you'll watch a video, or you'll see someone really well respected who says, if you run it at 28 degrees, that's higher energy, so you'll get better growth. Yeah, that's messing around. That's like saying amino acids will help your corals. Well, they might do if everything else is perfect. Cut that out. Cut out the 1%. That's the 1%. So just 25 degrees, which is what, 77 Fahrenheit, 76, something like that. 25 degrees, leave it at that. It's fine. Don't sweat it. 25 degrees, your corals will be absolutely fine. That will not be the problem. And really, all of these, it will. All of these things as well are eliminating issues. So if you're doing all of these things, they won't be your problem.
Yeah.
Salinity, big one, massive one. It should be in parts per thousand between 33 and 35, or in specific gravity 1.025 to 1.026. If it's within that range, happy days. If it's outside that range, you need to get it back within that range. And with most of these, if you're a couple of points out, it doesn't really matter. If you're at 26.1 degrees, I'm not going to come around and take your tank off you. It's not the end of the world. But if you're outside of 33 to 35 parts per thousand, that is a problem. So do get it back in that range. Salinity is really important. Don't just think 30 parts per thousand would be okay. Get it in the right range. That's really important.
How are you testing it?
Excellent question. I'm glad you asked. That's the other thing with this. So what are you testing? You've got to also ask yourself, what are you using to test it? If you're using a swing arm hydrometer, because it was cheap, there's a reason it's cheap. Okay, it's better than nothing. I'll give you that, but that's it. So I've used one, and actually a couple of times it gave me the spot on result. I was like, okay, this is cool. And then you test again, and for whatever reason, it's 30% out, and I'm like, that's weird. So if you test 3 times and it gives you 3 different results, which one's right? So just throw that away. It is better than nothing, but you're now into the point where you're buying corals, not just fish, and you need something better. So really, if for a start, if you're not sure, take it to your local fish shop and ask them to test it. Take a sample to your local fish shop and ask them to test it. But get a seawater refractometer.
That's what I was going to say, as a minimum.
And it doesn't have to be mega expensive, but don't get a cheap one, because you'll end up with a brine one or something weird. So get Red Sea or DD H2 Ocean. I'm sure there are other brands, but those two, they'll cost about 50 quid. They might have even gone up a little bit now. So they are expensive, but they're good, and you need a good one. Salinity is just so important. We've spent months talking about salinity.
Yes.
Can't tell you how important it is. So it's worth doing that. And if you're testing your salinity and it looks fine, calibrate the device you're using to test it. If you're using a HANA salinity pen, they can lose calibration real fast. So I wouldn't recommend those. Any digital salinity pen, they're a bit temperamental. A simple refractometer, optical refractometer is great. And you can calibrate it. All you need to do is drop a bit of RODI water on it, look through it, and it should say 0. If it doesn't say 0, your reading is off. So if you've checked your salinity and it looks fine, always calibrate the device you're using to test it to make sure it's accurate, because they drift. They just drift over time. So you can very easily think, well, my salinity's fine, which I had that. My salinity was bang on. And then I tested with a couple of other devices, then had to recalibrate the initial one, and I found out my salinity was not fine. I'd lost calibration. So if your salinity is okay, that's great, but recalibrate your device and get a second opinion. Take a sample to your local fish shop. Those are all the things I've got on salinity testing. Was there anything else you wanted to mention on that?
I actually wanted to ask your opinion on something. And I don't know if I'm crazy with this. I think I'm right. So if my salinity is slightly out, I adjust it before I test any of the other parameters.
You're not crazy, but it does. Everyone always says to do that, but it doesn't make as big a difference as you think, actually. Okay. So I've done that. I did an experiment with it, and actually, so on the Red Sea Reef Care, their new 4-part dosing. I can't remember, Reef Care, I think it's called. I can't remember. That tells you, it gives you a calculator basically, and I think it was, and don't quote me on this, but like 34 parts per thousand if your salinity is 400. If you push your salinity up to 35 per thousand parts per thousand, your calcium will be 410. So small differences, not insignificant. And you're right to do that, because everything else will be off. If your salinity is off, everything else will be an inaccurate measurement, or well, it's too low basically. So you're absolutely right, but don't think, oh, my salinity is off, therefore I can't test anything else. But just make sure that before you start correcting those other things, you correct your salinity, because salinity is the number one parameter. Temperature is arguably the number one, but that's really easy. You set it to 25 and that's it. You turn your heater on, that's it. Salinity is just easy to get wrong. I got it wrong a couple of years ago, and I've been doing this for 10 years now, and I got it wrong big time. So it's really easy to get wrong. So just make sure you're getting it right. It's really, 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 really important.
JJ just very quickly has mentioned the Tropic Marin hydrometer. That is true as well. I use them.
Yes, but so that's the bobbing. It's like a massive. They use it in like a brewing, basically. It's a massive glass bobbing thing. They're brilliant, but you must use it with the cylinder, the volumetric cylinder. If you just put it in your tank and let it bob, it'll give you a false reading. When I first got one, I put it in the tank, turned all the flow off, and it was all over the place. I was like, this is rubbish. So if you put it if you put the water sample in the 0.5 litre volumetric cylinder and then bob it in there, they're great. So no problem with that. They're just a bit of a faff, which is why the refractometer, optical refractometer, they're a little bit expensive, but they're well worth it. They're really simple. You can calibrate them very, very, very easily, and they're accurate. So, I've got no problem with some other devices, and I use a Hanna optical refractometer, and that's good. But a digital refractometer. But an optical refractometer is the best answer for most people, 90% of reefers. Alkalinity. Somewhere between 7 and 9 DKH is fine. You can argue that 9 is better than 7 or 8 is better than 8.5. I don't care. As long as you're in that range, you're good. If you're outside of that range, because you saw BRS say that running your tank or Red Sea say running your tank at 12 DKH can make your corals grow more quickly, revert back to the whole, this is the 99% thing. You can start doing that. If you've got everything else right and your tank is flourishing, then you're allowed to start messing around with higher alkalinity. But if you're not, then just go back to between 7 and 9. It doesn't really matter where. My alkalinity is currently 9. I prefer to keep it around 8, because then if it swings down a little bit or up a bit, it's fine. But I don't really care. And the fact that it's got to 9, I'm not really bothered. It's like, and if it's 9.1, that's fine. It's not like salinity that has to be exact. With alkalinity, 7 to 9 is fine. If it gets above that, start dosing a little bit less. If it gets below that, start dosing a bit more. But don't panic. But somewhere between 7 and 9 is fine. Outside of that, that might be what's causing you problems. Calcium. I put 420 to 450 parts per thousand million. And again, it's not, if your calcium is 410, that's not why all your corals are dying. You probably want to bump it up a little bit, but it doesn't really matter. So it doesn't matter if it's not exact. Then if your calcium was 460, that's not why your corals are dying. If your calcium's 600, that's why your corals are dying.
Yeah.
But 420 to 450, you're going to be fine, or roughly thereabouts. You don't want it to be much higher, but if it's 10 parts per million out, don't sweat it. That's a reading error on a test kit.
Yeah.
3 more parameters. Magnesium. Now, this was the one that I thought I put a range, but really I thought 1350. And which is what you run yours at.
Mine usually around like 1,100, don't you?
About 400, yeah. I don't like to. It bloody ends up there. So, but between 1,300 and 1,400 is roughly right. Again, if it drops a little bit below that, it's not the end of the world. But if it's at 1,100, that might well be what's causing your problems, especially with LPS corals, Montes, and various other corals that don't like high or low magnesium. And magnesium is one of those things that most people say it doesn't really matter if it's quite a lot higher. But if you're outside the 13 to 14, if your magnesium was 1,600, that might not be what's causing the problem. But again, it might be. So just get it back to, it should be 1350. So just get it back to 1350 and see how it is.
Yeah.
Those are your major elements. Your 2 final elements, and we'll come back onto testing in a sec. Your 2 final elements are nitrate and phosphate. They're not elements, or maybe they are, I don't know, but they're nutrients. So nitrate, and this is like, I don't know, I've put the rough range of 5 to 25 parts per million. You said 5 to 10, and I think that's probably a better range. But what I'm going is, if your nitrate is 20 parts per million, that's not why your corals are dying. If your nitrates are 100 parts per million, that might be why your corals are dying.
True.
So 5, and if they're 3 parts per million, that's fine. Don't worry too much. Around that range is fine. Again, salinity is essential. Nitrate, just there or thereabouts. And again, if it's falling outside of that range, bring it down, and that might be what's causing you problems. And the final parameter is phosphate. And again, I've put a broader range here. I've put 0.05 to 0.15. And actually, 0.05 is arguably a little bit higher than the lowest. And 0.15 is arguably a little bit higher than it should be. But the point of that, again, is if your phosphate is 0.15, that's not why your corals are dying.
Yeah.
Whereas if your phosphate is 0.8, that might be why your corals are dying. Not necessarily, but basically, you want, it doesn't really matter if it's a little bit high for the purposes of.
You're talking about 0.0, not 0.0.
No. If your phosphate is 0.8, that might be why your corals are dying.
I would say that would be why your corals are dying.
Yeah, exactly. But if your phosphate is 0.15, it might be why you've lost a tiny bit of yellow in your favourite aquarium. But it's not why your corals are dying, and it's not why everything's sulking.
Yeah.
So those are all the parameters. And if any of your parameters are outside of that range, bring them all back into that range, and you'll start seeing better results, as long as you've got a light, 2 power heads, the basics, temperature and all that sort of. If you've got all your parameters are in that range, you're good. If they're outside of that range, that might be what's causing you problems. Test kits as well. Now, test kits, you don't have to worry about buying it the latest. So I use HANA checkers. You can probably see them over my shoulder. Just about. I use HANA checkers for 3 things, but they're expensive. They're a thick end of 100 quid each now. They've gone up and up and up.
Are they?
They are.
Like 60.
Yeah. I know. They're getting more. They are very good, but you don't need them. So if you're just thinking, I don't want to spend too much money, just get Salifert. Salifert everything. Okay. Particularly for calcium and magnesium. I use Salifert calcium and magnesium, and I could easily get the HANAs if I wanted to. I just don't want to spend the money. And it's not even that. They're not as good as a Salifert. So just get Salifert test kits. You can watch all the BRS comparison videos then they're really useful, and they'll tell you these were the ones that we got the most repeatable results on, and these were the ones that was a little bit more difficult to use. Don't sweat it too much. Salifert, a brilliant company for test kits. They're cheap, they're reliable, they're consistent, and one of the great things is if you start getting a funny result, you can just throw it away because it costs 10 quid. Buy a new one, and then you will know you might just have had a duff test kit. In fact, check the date on your reagents, because reagents do wear off. They do go off over time. So if they're outside of their use by date, throw it away immediately, because it will give you a false reading.
I remember when I first started, I used to have test kits that went out of date. That is not even a remote possibility that would happen these days. I wasn't a very good reefer when I first started.
But because you weren't testing properly. Exactly. But
no one does.
but these, and that's why these are the things that are so important, because it's really easy actually. But if you're going outside of these things and trying to be, because sometimes you'll see really clever people like BRS Ryan, or even, and I'm not saying I'm a really clever person, but you'll watch one of my videos where I say, hey, do you know what? The one thing I found that's made a difference with gunnies is manganese. And you'll say, right, Reef Dork said manganese. I'm going to go and dose manganese. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you need to do all of these things, and then if you're doing 99% right, then start dosing the other things. So, and BRS Ryan is the same. So he talked about amino acids, but if you asked him, hey, I've got a brand new tank, my corals are all dying, how do I fix it? He wouldn't say amino acids. He'd say all the things that we're talking about today.
Yeah.
A couple of other things I wanted to talk about in terms of just issues to look out for. So canary in the coal mine is people often talk about that. They'll say Duncan is a really popular one, and I've got Duncans in my tank. A Duncan coral or a GSP is a really good canary in the coal mine, because if it's unhappy, it will tell you that your water parameters are off, and there is some merit in that. There absolutely is.
Yeah.
But the trouble with that is it gives you an excuse, because actually your coral will not tell you what your parameters are. I've been keeping LPS corals for 10 years. I can't look at any of them and tell what my alkalinity is. Okay. It's not possible. So and you give yourself an excuse. You say, oh, my Duncan's okay. Everything else is fine. This one coral's dying.
Everything else is on fire, but the Duncan's
no,
fine.
But it's exactly. Or even if it's just like one coral is suffering, everything else is fine. You're like, oh, everything else is fine. Yeah, but check everything. So canary in the coal mine is fine, and if a coral is suffering, you should do tests, but don't just think if one coral is okay, your water must be okay. It's not the case. We're now getting into kind of the more niche things. So if you've done all of the stuff I've talked about so far and you're still getting problems, you're pretty unlucky, to be honest. And just do all those things for a month and then check again. But then start thinking about things like, is the coral that's struggling difficult to keep? So if it's a gunny or a torch or an aquapora, then that might be why, because they're just fiddly. They're just a pain in the arse. So if they're dying, it doesn't mean that your tank's awful. Just stop buying them and leave it, and just come back to them in 6 months' time or something. But if you've got GSPs and Duncans and they're dying, then it's a problem. It's not because it's a fussy coral. Test all your water, do all the other things. Okay. So you just don't need to necessarily panic if you bought your first acro, for example, a barley green slimer, because it's been in the hobby for years. People sell them all over the place. They've always been tank bred for years. They're a hardy acro. It's still an acro. So if that dies, don't beat yourself up too much. Just stop buying acros for a little bit, and do all of the checks that we've talked about. If it's your first SPS and it's something like a Pasillipora or a bird's nest, and that's struggling, you've still got a problem. So if it's an acro, you might just have got, it might be a bit too fussy or whatever. But if it's a basic coral, Monty, Pocky, those kinds of things, and it's suffering, exactly. That's not just, well, you know what, it's my first SPS. There's a problem. And it's probably one of the things that we've talked about already. Then you got to look at if you've still got problems after all of that, look at what fish you've got, because sometimes fish eat corals. Sometimes you just didn't realize you bought an angelfish. You didn't realize it ate corals. So research all the fish you've got in your tank and see if they eat corals. But other times it's weird fish that start eating your corals that you wouldn't think, like a regal tang or certain types of blenny. There are some sailfin tangs. Some fish that you're like, no, they're completely reef safe, and they'll start eating. So, I think if you Google, I've not done this, so I might be embarrassing myself, but if you Google regal tang eat coral reef safe, I bet there'll be plenty of stories. Exactly. So look up all your fish and you'll find that. Wow. That also applies to things like shrimp. So there are certain shrimp that will eat corals. Like you might have a peppermint shrimp that's not the right kind of peppermint shrimp, or you might have bought a camel shrimp not realizing what it was or whatever. So any shrimp you've got, that might be the problem. But again, this is less likely. And other things like coral warfare is potentially an issue too. So it's particularly if you've got a coral that suddenly has sustained a lot of damage and it's next to something else, it might have been stung. So research that coral that you've got, and if you've got a Galaxia and the coral next to it has suddenly died, there's a good chance that was what killed it.
True.
Especially if you've just put it there next to it, and it's
even if it's like 15 centimeters away, it can still a Galaxia can still get it. So the best thing to do, look at night, because that's when corals really go for each other.
Yeah. There's three more things I've got on this list actually. One, be careful who you take advice from.
Yeah,
it's really tempting to, when you're new to the hobby, you seek out new people. I see it quite a lot of times on Facebook and Instagram and forums as well. People look for the people they know because they're in the same boat. But actually, if you're new to the hobby, people who are new to the hobby are always well-meaning, and I've been there trying to help. But actually, you want to be taking advice from. There are people on forums on Ultimate Reef. There are some really good, seasoned, experienced hobbyists, and those are the people you want to be listening to. And as much as anything, someone might say, if it's someone new, they might say, "Oh, well, Reef Dork said that Calculator was brilliant, so why don't you try that?" That's not what I said. It's been misunderstood. Whereas someone who's been doing it 20 years and is really experienced on Ultimate Reef, they'll say, "Yeah, look, forget that. That's not why. This is it," and they'll give you solid advice. So be a little bit careful about who you take advice from. And if all of that fails, all of this stuff fails, and you've still got problems, then you can do an ICP test.
Yeah.
But when you do an ICP test, you are not looking to see what level your barium is and see if you need to add 0.725 milliliters of molybdenum,
chromium,
or any of that nonsense. Again, I'm not saying that's not important to some people. That's the 1%.
Yeah.
So do all of this and then worry about that. But you're looking for zinc, copper, what's the other one? Tin. There are certain, if you've got a rusting magnet in your tank, there are certain metals that appear on an ICP test. And so if you see a load of pollutants in there, then you need to go and check all your power heads and your heater, and you need to find the rusting thing. There was one thing, I don't want you to look at ICP tests for trace elements at this stage. Again, it's not that you can't do it, but you might find like your iodine's low. Iodine is always low on an ICP test, or almost always. And someone might have said on a forum or a video or whatever, zoas need iodine, which they do, but you don't need to start dosing it. That's almost certainly not your problem, especially if you've got lots of issues. Again, that's the 1%. And you mentioned earlier, strontium is one thing that you do look out for on an ICP test. But the reason that's different is because you've got all of these other things in check.
Yeah, true.
So because you do everything properly, you're allowed to start looking at strontium. If your tank is all to crap and you're not doing any of these things, I don't care how good your strontium is, it's not going to fix it.
No, I know what you mean. Oh, you can definitely go wrong when you start trying to play like mad scientist with them. I think it was chromium that I put a slight too much in. It wasn't like I followed the recommendations, but like, how many of you actually know exactly how much water is in your tank? Now remember, the coral farm I have always said is 1,800 liters for one half, and the other one I think is 2,200. Yeah, is that actually accurate? Because I don't know if that's accurate. I only have to change the water level in the tank to adjust. Like that could be not hundreds, but like that could be like 50 liters difference by changing the water level. Yeah.
If your weir box starts to clog up, your weir comb starts to clog up with algae, you get more water in.
Exactly. That's what I mean. So So what I do when I'm dosing some of the trace elements, which I know you're not recommending now, I do it at half the recommended rate and do it much slower, because if you don't need to, generally speaking, if your trace elements are out, it's taken months, years sometimes to get to that stage. You don't need to fix them in 3 days. And the reason people try to fix them in 3 days is because they don't want to have to think about it anymore. They want to go, right, dose, done. But that's not what our tanks need. Yeah. So if you are going to dose them, which I know you're recommending not to unless it's the very last step, do it slowly, because there is no rush.
Completely. And that's the thing. It's like turning a tank around. It's not going to you're not going to fix your tank immediately, but you will do. If you do all of these things, you will, and that's a guarantee. If you do it all properly, you'll turn it around in a month or two.
Yeah.
But be honest with yourself as well. Really important. It's so easy just to think to, like, if you're posting on forums as well, or on Facebook, when people see who you are, you don't want to feel stupid. So someone might say, what are your parameters? And you might say, oh, my magnesium's 1350 because you tested it 2 months ago. Be honest. If you don't have to be honest on publicly, but be honest with, but be honest with yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, completely. Because so if you haven't tested your magnesium for 6 months, then go and test it. Or if you have, but you don't want to admit that it's 1,000 publicly, then fine. But do make sure you correct that, and just don't convince yourself it's okay. It must be something else. Be honest with yourself as to how often you test and what your true results are. And it's really easy if people say, what are your parameters? You to say, oh, my salinity is 1.025 because that's what it was a month ago or 2 months ago. That's not what it is now. It might be, but you must test regularly. Correct. So, and if people ask you if people like yourself, Ryan, ask you what your parameters are, don't tell them what they were 2 months ago. Test them now and tell them what they were. Even the last couple of days, fine, but don't give old data.
The best way as well to get advice from other people online, if you want like serious hobbyists to help you, don't write, I've got this problem with my Duncans, my parameters are fine. Because no serious hobbyist is going to come to you and go, oh, that's interesting, this is what your problem is.
Yeah, if you put
if you put the effort in and go, right, here's a picture of the coral, this is what all my parameters, this is what I've done, you're more likely to get someone who is a long-term hobbyist come forward and go, I'm willing to help you. Because they don't want any barrier to entry. So if the barrier to entry is what are your parameters, they're not going to help you. Put it in the original message.
Yeah, completely.
And it also shows that you care enough to put it in the original message, because my parameters are fine doesn't mean anything.
No.
It doesn't mean anything to anyone. Because what is fine?
Well, fine might be the shop told me that I should keep my calcium at 380.
Yeah.
Fine
fine also might be that the person thought that their alkalinity is meant to be 15.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
and it's not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just do be honest with yourself and do test regularly. It just makes a difference. And if you've got the other thing people do, and I've done it myself 1,000 times, you look at your tank and you've got one coral that's suffering, and you're like, I want to know what this one niche thing is. So it might be, you might like you said strontium for zoas or whatever, and you go looking and you're like, right, zoas need elevated levels of strontium, right, on it. That must be it. Just be honest with yourself. Have you actually tested your salinity? Have you tested all of these other things? If you haven't got all of these other things right, that is, every time you got a problem with your coral, you should actually go through this entire list. This hobby is really boring because it's really simple and you just need to repeat the basics. And if you go through all of this and you've still got problems, then well done, you're Than from Tidal Gardens, and you've got a slightly quirky thing you've got a titanium screw that's leaking or something. But that is basically how to work out what's gone wrong with your tank.
Pretty much. There's only 2 things on my list which you've missed, or that I have written down. One of them, so pests is one of them. I think people should need to be able to identify what pests that they have. There are some pests which are more common than others. It's very unusual for you. Like, don't get me wrong, there'll be someone who's got some weird pest that no one else has, but most people will have the same set of like 10 like common pests, flatworms, nudibranchs, things like that.
Nudies, yeah.
So identification of what pests are, I actually think, is important.
How do you do that though? Because like if you have a Monty that's just got patches of white on it, and you don't know what a Monty eating nudibranch is, how the hell would you identify that?
So most people in that situation only learn what a Montipore eating nudibranch is after having them. So that but most people don't know what they are until they go, wait a minute, my Monty's got these patches missing from it. Then they go to Facebook and they say, this is my Montipora, what's happening to it? Panicking, and someone goes, look underneath it. And then they realize what they are. It's probably similar with most pests, I would say. I think that pests are the most underlooked at thing when people do research for what they're going to do. They'll look at the corals, they'll look at the fish they want, but pests and algae and things like that, people don't look into it, and those are the things they should look at, because then it stops you from getting into trouble later down the line. The amount of times over the last 17 years I've seen people buy Aptasia, it's like or a coral with Aptasia on it. Like, if you knew what that was before you bought it, you wouldn't be buying it.
No.
So,
and the other way you identify pests like Montinudes, for example, is if you've gone through this whole list. That's not cool. You're doing all of these things, and you're being honest with yourself. You're doing all of these things, and you've still got a problem. Then you post a photo on a good forum, Ultimate Reef in the UK, Reef to Reef in the States. If you're in another country, you can still use those. I'm sure there are others in Australia or wherever, but those are the two best ones in the UK and the US. And you will find someone experienced who will help you. But what you need to do is you need to post a photo of your whole tank and of the coral. Get it as best a photo as you can. So don't take the photo at 10 o'clock at night when it's all blue. Take it when the lights are at their whitest in the middle of the day and their brightest. So, because if it's a really dark photo, you're pissing in the wind, frankly. Whereas if it's a photo taken under white lights that are bright, it's easier for people to identify. And again, like you said earlier, the barrier to entry. So if you've got a really experienced person who's really helpful on a forum and you're posting them, this is... You're posting bad photos because there's an expression that I'm thinking, and it's what people talk about in terms of computers: shit in, shit out.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so if you're giving someone bad data, you're going to get a bad answer. Okay, so if you're giving someone good data, they're more likely to. They're actually, if you're posting a really good photo as well, they're more likely to want to help you. If you post this god awful photo, deep blue lights, it doesn't show anything. It looks like this might not be it, but it looks like you can't be bothered. It might just be that you've just noticed and you want to do a photo quickly, but it looks like you can't be bothered to turn your lights onto white or take a right photo at the right time or whatever. So those things really help as well. And a full tank shot under white lights and as close as you can get without distorting the image of the coral, then you will find someone. If you've done all these other things, someone will say, have a look underneath for eggs. Or if you've got a macro lens actually for photography, you can see that's when you see stuff on corals that you don't see otherwise. So they're really good for identifying pests. If you've got a macro lens, take a photo of the thing and then zoom in, and you'll see weird stuff on there.
And
what else?
The other one was contaminants. So although you mentioned things like metal rusting, things like hairspray, candles, even like flea powder for dogs. If your dog, I think they put powder
it's an
on
insecticide,
dogs.
isn't it? So.
Yeah. All of these things are something which can affect the tank. And sometimes our partners will go, I want to put a nice candle on. Candles are basically banned in my house. Air fresheners, pretty much no hairsprays allowed. Or anything like that has to be used in one room in the upstairs bathroom or whatever, a long way away from the tank. Am I being overly cautious? Maybe. I don't use any,
why risk it?
Disinfectant spray in the kitchen. I only use wipes. I won't use any spray because it is in the air and the tank's in the kitchen.
So that might be a little bit paranoid, but the reason that you should do that anyway is because if it is that and you're using table spray and you have been doing for years, there's no way of identifying that. No test.
No ICP will tell you.
Whatever. Yeah. So you won't be able to identify. So. But okay, there you go. So other contaminants, but basically, if you're doing all of those things that we've talked about today, and your corals are still knackered, well, I mean, then you need to find someone experienced on Ultimate Reef or Reef Reef or whatever. But those will cure 99% of problems if you do it right.
Yeah,
probably higher than 99%.
True. Good luck, people.
It's that easy.
Yeah,
there's a lot there, to be fair.
The only other thing that I wrote down was observation. If you don't look at your tank, you won't know you have a problem. And looking at your tank is one of the most fun parts of having a tank. But there's lots of people that don't look at their tanks. They don't have the time or it's not in the right location. I spent probably
location's key.
Yeah, my tank was in the hallway of my parents' house. Why would I never, there was no sofa or anywhere to sit or anything like that. I literally, I would see it as I walked past it. That was it. And when I did the water changes, but sitting and observing your tank is one of the most enjoyable parts. And secondly, it helps you because you do get a feel for it. And you do notice when things go wrong more often.
Do Do you know what else is really useful? Actually, orange glasses. So you get those orange glasses that take away the blue light and stuff. There are two brands. What I think it's Fritz. There's two that are common. The DD ones are okay, but they're not brilliant. The Fritz ones, I think, is with orange side bits. They're fantastic. But anyway, either will do.
Yeah.
If you put those on, you see things in your corals that you don't notice otherwise. Actually, they're really
100%.
good for that. And
Yeah.
I used to do that with acros a lot, because you'd see bits of flesh missing or whatever. It's the trouble with this is you stop enjoying your tank and you just start looking for problems.
Yeah. Sometimes if you can have a problem for years, if you don't know what it is, it's not a problem. If it's not, it's not cause. There are some flatworms that live on Euphilia. I was at one of my clients' houses the other day. And when I say the other day, it was about probably 3 or 4 years ago now. And I said to him, you've got like flatworms on that. And he went, I've never noticed. I've never noticed.
Thanks, Ryan.
And they don't cause a problem.
Exactly.
So why did it bother him? It's funny because if it's not causing a problem, it's no different to a snail in your tank. But it's because it's a flatworm, you don't want it there.
So there's actually, I actually don't think it is, but I saw on the glass of my cade, I don't know, 6 months ago, what looked like flatworms, tiny little things. I think actually they were probably something else.
Yeah.
But when I first saw them, I was like, But they've been, if it is flatworms, they've been in there for a long time now, and they're not causing any problems at all. So I've now got to the point where I think, well, I don't think it is them, and actually I don't see them anymore. But if it is them, I don't care. They're not a problem. So
yeah, I agree.
Okay. So what I would have liked to do actually is read through all these comments, because I bet there's some useful stuff. But I'll do that afterwards. I'll watch this back and I'll look at the comments. Alex, please could you post a checklist of these points? No point in asking Ryan; he won't get around to doing it. Oh, burn, Ryan!
I also saw Jay said, "How do I do my hair without hairspray?" Essentially, so yeah.
Yes, I will actually. Good point. I almost deleted it. In fact, let me make sure I undelete that last.
I have been crossing them off as we go along, so I've essentially been deleting them.
I've deleted a few, but I'm just undeleting stuff. There we go. I think we're good. Yeah, fine. I will do. I'll post it in the description of this video, and I'll post it on the Facebook group.
Microscope. It is not necessarily something that, but it's true. It makes a massive difference. If you are fighting something that you don't know what it is, knowing what it is can make a massive difference. And I'm not suggesting everyone goes get a microscope, but if you can get it, I think you can get pretty cheap ones. You can fight a problem for ages having no idea what it is, and you're doing the wrong thing. So if you're not actually fighting it, you're letting it get out of control. So having a microscope for me made a massive difference, even just mentally, because then you know what you're doing. So, and that isn't advertising for me to say, come send me your water. Do you want to know a secret? I hate it when people send me their water because it usually stinks. It usually smells terrible when you open it. And I'm like, what are people doing with their tanks that it smells this bad? So, but yes, having access to a microscope has been great fun for me in all different aspects of it, but it also helps you identify what you're actually dealing with.
I think that's in the 1% category, but I will allow it because it is useful.
I'm not necessarily saying look, you don't need to buy one, but if you've got dinoflagellates, it's not easy. It's not easy to deal with.
That's actually for things like dinos, then 100%. It's because people often post, what kind of dinos is this? And they just post a photo. And actually, the best dinoflagellate expert in the world won't be able to identify it from a photo.
Correct.
So actually, for that, it's really useful. But I wouldn't buy a microscope. I would send it to someone like you, or Fish of Hex in the US does a similar service, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But yeah, you've found it really interesting, the things you see now, don't you?
I
use it.
Yeah, all the time. Literally all the time. Sometimes I'll get I don't know, just weird things I look at. Even looking at a piece of like a really small piece of live rock or something like that, you see all these little weird things like crawling all over it. I'm past the stage where I'm putting things on slides. I'm now like seeing what I can fit under it. And I'll look at that. I looked at a piece of coral under it. And I thought, what's that little black dot on this coral? And then I realized it was actually an acro. I realized that it wasn't anything. It was just like a little hole. And then you look at it around, and there was loads of little black dots on it. But it wasn't like an actual pest or anything.
That's
So
one thing I did. So I had with my macro lens, I had a tenuous that was fading. I had it for a long time, and it suddenly started to look bad. I started taking macro photos on the underside of the branches.
yeah,
There were these little marks, and I was like, oh god, is that some kind of flatworm or something? So I took some macro photos, and I was like, oh god, no. And so on the back of that, I took it out and dipped it because I was like, oh, this is a problem. And then I looked at the macro photos again, and I tweaked the shadows and made it a better image. It was
yeah.
polyps, new polyps coming through.
That's why I'm saying that was what it was for me, I think.
Yeah.
But because I was like, is this something I should be concerned with? And then I looked at
Yeah.
the whole piece, and it was the underside, and I think there were loads of these little dots on it. So
That's it. And because the part I was looking at, there was never any polyps there at all.
yeah,
And so suddenly seeing these marks, I was like, oh god, no. But it was just coral growth.
yeah, yeah,
East Coast Reefer's got a theory as to why your samples smell. That's not
yeah.
water they're sending you, Ryan.
Trust me, as I said, some of them, like, it literally like makes you gag when you open it. You're like,
Yeah, but that must be because it's died something's died in the post.
I don't know,
Bacteria or something.
I'm not sure. Some of the samples you get, people usually send the samples to me when it's like they're at the very end. And some people who have sent me the samples might be offended that I'm saying this, but like,
Is what it is.
when I send coral to people, it doesn't smell like that. The pots. I've even sent corals to well, I've received corals. It doesn't smell like that. But for some reason, like maybe it's because it's sand. I'm not sure. It just smells awful.
Does it smell? You know when a coral arrives dead. You know
No,
that
it
smell.
doesn't even smell like that.
Okay.
I can't even
that
describe what. It's worse than that.
Jeez.
I've had that smell when corals come from Indonesia. It's like you get used to like that's nothing for me anymore. This is like a powerful smell.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, we're going to do member questions.
okay.
Of which there is one. Oh, hang on. Gaz's Reef wants to know how often I dose manganese, hourly or daily. Daily, I think I dose. I couldn't even tell you, to be honest. I think I dose like 6 mil a day on my main tank. I don't dose it on the Cade, and I think I dose like 1 milliliter at a time, so spread out over 6 hours. But and I did on my water box, I dosed it. I think I dosed 3 mil a day, and again, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, once in the evening. But,
yeah.
Surrey Reefer says, what are the essential tools? This is a Ryan question. The essential tools when fragging zoas, euphyllias, or sticks. All different things. My tank has gone to a point now where I want to have a look at fragging more than just a little tidy up. Ryan, you're going to say a bandsaw.
No, I'm going to say a Dremel because no one has a bandsaw other than people that are like very, very serious at fragging. Yes, a bandsaw is the best thing to have, but most people can get access to a Dremel, and I don't think they're that expensive. I don't own one, so I don't know.
I do. You want to get, so actually with the Dremels, you want to get the wireless ones, because the ones that you have to plug in, because it's a bit of a pain to plug it in, and then you go to plug it in and all your plug sockets are taken because reef tanks. So then you have to get an extension lead and plug it into the room next door. Get the cordless ones. They're really, really good. And there's a big cordless one, which I've got. It's quite heavy and unwieldy. And there's a smaller cordless one that's much lighter and much better. So, and they're only 60 quid. And the disc you want to get is this one, the Dremel Easy Speed Click Diamond Cutting Wheel. It's super thin, really, really thin. And it cuts brilliantly. It's so good. The normal ones, the normal discs, are quite thick, so it's quite a blunt tool for a coral. But the diamond ones, they slice through like a bandsaw. They're really, really good.
Now that is only of that list. That's only for Euphilia. Or you can use them for stylos and things like that, like the thick branches of things. But of that list, zoas, Euphilia, and I can't remember. You said sticks, I think.
Sticks.
The reason I say that is because there are way better and easier ways to frag a Hystrix than with a Dremel.
Hystrix just snap.
Yeah, literally. Or most SPS can be fragged with toenail cutters, and I've said this loads of times. They cost like £5, and they're from, I think, Boots, and they are the best. I've had £60 frag cutters which have gone rusty. They're not sharp. They have like a crushing thing. Toenail cutters are incredibly sharp, and I've used 3 of them in 4 years. Normal frag cutters, they last like 3 or 4 months for me usually, and then they go rusty. You can like rinse them off and everything, but because I'm using them every single day, nothing has been better. The toenail cutters don't even go rusty.
So the ones I have, I rinse them, and I've had them for years, and they're fine. But there are times I use them for acros. If you
Yeah,
just put them in your tank and then twist it, that will snap most acros off
yeah,
and most sticks basically. But I do the Dremel. I do like to sometimes cut the because when you do that, you don't get a clean cut. Whereas if you
yeah.
Dremel the base off, it's then really easy to mount it upright on a coral, so it doesn't on a frag plug. Sorry, so it doesn't fall over.
I think I saw somewhere. Now, don't quote me on this because this might be something I'm making up. So, is that it's better to break them rather than cut them. And
Yeah,
and,
you might
and
be.
I do actually notice that with some delicate Montipora. If I cut them with a bandsaw, they don't survive. If I cut them with
Oh, really?
toenail cutters, they survive. It might be the heat from the saw, although there's got
It's
water
true.
going through it.
Flesh.
It could be the bacteria from the saw.
Yeah.
Whereas remember when I cut things, I usually cut and I do change the water, but I'm not like fully sterilizing it each time. So I might cut a Goniopora and then I'll cut a Montipora. So
Do you
it could
put
be,
them in iodine bath? You
yes,
do, don't you?
yeah, I
Afterwards,
do,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I actually have a pretty low death rate with regards to fragging corals. I wouldn't be making much profit if I didn't have if I had a high success rate.
Should be good at it.
So yeah, there are different things, and with regards to zoas, you and I feel very differently about them. Definitely don't do anything which aerates them like a Dremel.
You don't want to follow my advice. So I don't Dremel them, but you don't want to follow my advice on.
Your advice is just put your hand in and grab them, isn't it?
It's not advice, but what I do, and I honestly don't do this.
I'm not even sure it's wise saying this to people because does it almost make you liable?
Then I won't say it. It doesn't. I won't say it. So I do it bad. Ryan does it right. What do you do?
So I actually don't even frag zoas now out of the water. Usually, most of the zoa, they're usually on discs or plates or whatever, and I will cut the plate in half underwater,
Okay.
and then I will stick them on. I had a very, very, very bad experience with them to the extent where I am a coral seller, and I'm not joking, that is frightened of fragging zoas. So I've actually fragged loads recently, but what I do now, for 20 minutes each day, I'll frag them. So rather than when I made myself really sick, it was like 5 or 8 hours of fragging just zoas with a saw, aerating them, covering me, because obviously when you're fragging with a saw, you get covered in slime and everything. So I now just 20 minutes in the morning, go and cut a few zoas up, and so to minimize the risk. So don't do loads in one go, basically is what I'm trying to say.
I'm going to say what I do because.
Okay, go on then.
someone else. So I do this in the tank as well, to be fair. But I find it doesn't work with all of them. With some of them, you put your hand in, and especially if it's a big colony, you'll touch them, and some of them will just shrivel away. But if you get to the edge of a rock, sometimes you'll get a little bit of mat that's like flapping up, and you just peel it off, and then you just get this little peely mat of like 10 zoas.
No gloves, nothing. Just pull them off, sticks them on.
I'm hard, Ryan. And then you stick them on a frag plug, but you shouldn't do that because it's bad.
Yeah, the reason I said is because it's a liability for us telling people what we do sometimes.
yeah, it's true, and that is do as I do, not as I say. Do as I say, not as I do. But that was the member question, and we've got now. This is late for Prestige Reef Fish of the Week.
Yeah,
and that's the way he does it. Good lad. But what is the Prestige Reef Fish of the Week, Ryan?
I've gone for a Scarus koi, I believe it says how it's pronounced.
Yeah.
Now you're going to have to talk about this fish because you have had one.
Briefly, I don't have much knowledge about them, but I saw one at Reef Keeper Muss End this weekend, and I can say this: if my tank was ready, I'd buy it because it was amazing. But I can say this because it's not going to be there in 2 months' time. It was beautiful. It was some of them look a bit. Like some of them look like this one, and actually that's a different kind of one, I think. But some of them, here we go. That's a good example. Oh no, don't show a video. That one there, the colours are a bit drab, and it doesn't look that great. The one in Reef Keeper Must End at the moment is more like this one. It looks stunning, really bright colours. And
there's a few of them out at the moment. I saw one today as well in Maidenhead Climping, so they must be seasonal. Yeah,
probably, but they're really. Some of them can look a bit boring. Some of them can look amazing. The one in Reef Keeper currently looks amazing. My experience with it was that I put it in my SPS tank. For a start, they're quite big, and they get pretty big, so you don't really want one in a. I put it in a 4-foot tank. I think actually a 6-foot tank is the minimum size, just because it's a big fish. It doesn't look right in a small tank as much as anything. So I wouldn't have one in a smaller than 5-foot, ideally 6-foot. I think probably. But my experience with him was I put him in an SBS dominated tank, Aquapora dominated tank, and he started crunching the bases of my most. I just bought a load of frags from Euro Corals. This was pre-Brexit. It's how long ago it was, and the 150 quid a frag, and he was scraping at the base of scraping off the growth at the base of the frag. And I was like, oh mate, on like the two most expensive ones. He was probably just trying to get to algae underneath, because that's what they do. So I think if I'd have left him in, he would have been fine. And I've spoken to other people who say no, they're fine. They do that, but it's fine. They're not trying to eat the coral. They're just trying to get algae. So he probably would have been fine. But because it was my most expensive aquarius, I was like, I can't do this. So I fished him out, took him back to the local fish shop, and lost 50 quid. So, but they're really cool. They're really cool. And they've got like friendly little beaky faces. They're algae eaters. And yeah, bit of character.
Yeah. They don't do it for me. I like the color of them, and I see why people would want them, but I wouldn't get one myself. Like,
oh, really?
No, I don't know what it is. They look. I think it's just because they're too chunky. If you look at all the other fish, the only other fish I can think of which is a similar level of chunk to them is because that's how I measure fish these days, chunk level. Is what's the one with the teeth? Harlequin
tuskfish.
Yeah, they have that sort of like square look, don't they?
It looks like a fish you'd eat, not like a pet.
Yes, yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
I like Harlequin tusks too.
Yeah, they're cool. I had a bad experience with that one as well.
Yeah, I know. Let's not mention it.
And what is the Prestige Reef invertebrate of the week?
Oh, see, yes, good. I'm not doing a coral of the week this week. I have decided to do an enemy. No, an anemone. There you go.
There you go. Got it.
Yes. I wanted to do a bubble tip anemone because people love these. People, I think I've sold like 5 of them just this week. They're not. I don't have them on the website. People come and collect them in person, and they come in different colorations. People usually don't have. I think people have struggled to keep different colors together. So I think it was BRS who said that they've tried to keep pink and green ones in the same tank, and even if they're nowhere near each other, they don't survive. And I've had the same thing where I've had a green one and a pink one together, and it didn't work out.
There's a word for that. Allelopathy, allelopathy, something like that.
But that's just anecdotal. That's what they've said, and I have experienced the same thing. I don't know if it's true or not, and I also don't know if I had them in different tanks in the farm, if it would be, or if, because it's one system, would that stop them from growing? I don't know. Someone will know. Someone out there will have had both of them for a long time.
If you get a bog standard red bubble tip anemone, fine.
Yeah.
What are the downsides of bubble tip anemones, Ryan?
Oh, they sort of like roam around, split, sit on corals. I don't know. They almost have a character of their own. And this is true. Corals don't have a character, but an anemone, which looks similar to a coral, actually has a character because it does whatever it wants. And if it's not happy, it will just move. It will literally just move. Plus side, they split. If they split into an area where you can get them out and sell them, they're relatively good money. So it can fund you a bucket of salt. Maybe not a whole bucket.
No.
Maybe a small bucket.
I have them in a cage. I've had them for about a year now, and I do really like them. They look amazing. And when I get clownfish back in there, they'll be cool if I can train them to go in there. But they split, and it does my head in because you end up they pop off all over the place, and they'll sit somewhere you don't want. And if they're dug into a rock, if one is split and it's gone into a rock somewhere, you're not getting it off. If it escapes, and I found a couple. There was one that sucked onto the glass, piece of cake. You can just gently roll its foot off. And I found one that got stuck to my GSP, weirdly. Again, dead easy. You just reach in and pop it off. So if you get lucky, great. But if it attaches to a rock, forget it. You're not getting it off. Yeah. So they can be a bit of a pain, and then they move around and they start stinging other corals. And
so I had about probably 30 would be an exaggeration. I probably had about 20 of them in a they're like boxes for plants for ponds, like these black There's loads of
know the
pond
ones
stuff you
mean,
can
yeah.
use in coral farming. I've realised, but yeah. So the box somehow flipped over, and then they all escaped pretty much in one go. So I now had them all over the coral, one tank in the coral tray. They're underneath the racks, and there is no getting to them. And even some of them I've tried to remove, and now I have two of them because where I've tried to like pull off, one of them was on a one of the legs of the frag rack, and it was also on the rack. And where I've removed the leg, it split the anemone in half. And
Right.
you would think that would kill it, but it doesn't. I now have two. So, but yeah, they caution. If you want one, just be. It's similar to many things, xenia and things like that. You might have more than one eventually.
Do you really want a bubble tip anemone?
Yeah.
I can see the Prestige Reef video now.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I should do that.
Why don't you do? I was thinking today actually. Why don't you do coral guides, coral care guides? Because you see all sorts in your.
I have some of them. Do you want to know that? Well, the truth is, they take a lot more effort, as you know, than if you're just doing like a vlog style thing. That's the truth. I can do it.
Good for your business.
No, I know. I know. The other thing is, I used to get lots and lots of videos from everywhere, so clips from shops and tanks and things like that. Whereas if you're filming just from the coral farm, the images look mostly the same. There's not enough contrast to, in my opinion, to keep it interesting.
Yeah, okay.
Like if I've got 3 different torches in, I can only film. There's only so many angles I can film those 3 different torches under different lighting. That's the main reason. I don't think it'll be interesting. If I've got old video, or I did one on torches, for example. Do you really want to torch coral? Which was I think it was a very popular video. And let's put it this way, if I did those videos all the time, my channel would be far more successful than it is. But they also take a lot more time to do, and they're script written. You have to try and make them funny. So, well, I try and make them funny and entertaining. Whereas people are like, stop telling us jokes, just give us the information. But there is a lot actually that I've probably learned over the years because I would have seen stuff that other people just wouldn't.
And that's what I mean. So you probably had a million Monties, for example.
Yeah.
Whereas a normal hobbyist will, 1,000. Whereas normal hobbyists would have had 10. Yeah. Anyway, okay, that is the Prestige Reef Fish of the Week and the Prestige Reef Coral of the Week, which means we're on to the news. Invertebrate of the week, sorry. Right. And there are 3 bits of news here. Right, 4 bits of news. Oh, the first one. Aqua H 2025.
Yes.
Next year. So this was the UK's largest coral show. Next year is going to be even bigger.
Yeah.
Fish sales next year. They've got.
I saw that. Oh, that's look. I thought that was interesting because I thought that was impossible, but they've done it.
That was a proper jaw open wow moment for me.
Yeah.
So live fish and live reptiles, they said as well.
Yeah.
So they're gonna do reptiles and they're gonna go again. So yeah. So Aqua H 2025. They've already booked in the 20th to the 21st of September, and there will be fish sellers there as well.
Yeah.
I've booked my hotel today.
Me too.
You've booked yours, haven't you? Yeah. So we're staying at the Premier Inn Coventry South, which is the closest one to it. So Premier Inn Coventry South. Book your hotel.
You'll get an influx of bookings tonight because everyone wants to get in before everyone else does.
Yeah, indeed. I haven't bought tickets for the event because I'm going to get a YouTuber ticket.
VIP famous. Is that what you get?
But if I wasn't, I would have bought one as well.
Yeah.
aquah.co.uk.
Yeah. It was better than anyone expected last year, and I think it will be even bigger this year. In fact, I think it'll be way bigger this year because everyone knows what they're going to get.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and also, I think so. One of the complaints people had was there wasn't enough reptile sellers. If you can sell reptiles there now, I think that will be a whole different ball game for people. The fish thing doesn't so much interest me. It doesn't. I think for me, as a non-fish seller, really, it's too much hassle to like set up a fish system to sell fish. I think the corals are enough hassle for me. But if you're a shop that has fish already and has all the equipment that you need to sell fish, I see why you'd do it. And if you got, I think they're aiming for like 7,000 people, I think, aren't they, or something? Originally they said. If you've got 7,000 people going, one of those is going to want to buy that really, really rare fish that you've had hanging out in your shop for the last like 8 months that no one's buying because it's
If you want to take
£600.
the risk of traveling it,
True,
but
yeah.
still, if you can do it properly. But yeah, but so live reptiles as well. Yeah, that's because they're basically kind of the equivalent of corals, hobby to hobby, aren't they? Because
Yeah.
reptile sellers must want to sell them there. But
I think I'm doing it bigger and better. I think the other people that did it this year will be doing it bigger and better, and I think that other sellers will sign up because they saw how good it was. So,
completely.
yeah.
So there you go. Book your tickets. Shall I do? I'm going to do some news that Ryan will like. I'm going to do the classic shit sandwich, Ryan.
Nice.
So I'm going to do a layer of good news.
Yeah.
A layer of equipment news, and then I'm going to finish with a layer of non-equipment news. Okay.
Okay.
And my plan is that you won't glaze over because it's only like 30 seconds. All right. So
Okay.
I thought this was fun actually. There's in Hawaii, and I think it's finished this week actually, but they were having a coral and an unwanted aquarium creatures amnesty. So for anything that you shouldn't have, illegal non-native marine or
interesting.
What's the word? Animals. I can't remember the word I was thinking of, but anyway, anything you shouldn't have, there's an amnesty.
Yeah.
And so you could take it to, I think it was a museum or a public aquarium or something. No questions asked, they'd give it back. After that, it's 3-year fine and 3 years in prison, 200 grand fine.
Yeah.
But before that, there's no questions asked. You can bring your lionfish in and hand it back.
I'd love to know what turned up. Like, did anyone accept it? And was it like someone like, oh yes, sorry, I've had this sea turtle in my tank for the last year, and I wasn't meant to.
Yeah. But it was called the "Don't Let It Loose." Yeah, "Don't Let It Loose" campaign. But I found it funny because, like in most countries, you'll have, and I know Hawaii isn't a country, but in most places that do an amnesty, it'll be guns or knives or something like that.
Yeah.
And in Hawaii, it's fish and corals.
I wonder what they're most fearful of. Like what?
Yeah, I wonder if there was a particular thing. Corals, maybe. With pests or something, I don't know.
Well, when you actually go onto the website, the things that come up are frogs, lizards, and snakes mostly the most, and there are fish on there, but the most, and there's a turtle that comes up. So it must be a reptile thing. They have a real problem with reptiles in Florida, like snakes getting loose.
Yeah, I think non-native corals are probably a problem as well. That anyway, I just thought it was funny because the amnesties are normally for guns and they're doing it for corals, but that's cool as well. So if that is you and you're in Hawaii, pretty unlikely, and you've got your illegal fish, go there now before midnight.
Yeah, true.
You won't go to prison. Okay, we've done the layer of bread. We're now going to do the filling, Ryan.
Okay. So I'm still looking at the other one. I'm looking on their website.
Anything else you want to talk about on the Hawaii amnesty?
No, I literally will look at it after the stream because I'm interested.
Okay. The Hydros Maven. Do you know what the Hydros Maven is?
No, I think
it's a
computer, isn't it? It's a tank
tester,
control.
automatic tester. Excuse me. Yeah, but it tests the Holy Trinity or the whatever the Trinity word is for 5. Nitrate, phosphate, alkalinity, magnesium, and calcium. That's pretty good. The release date has been delayed, though. It was supposed to be released on the 29th of November, which I think is Black Friday from the sounds of it. But it's been pushed back, and there's no date now. Apparently, they've just said it's been pushed back. But that doesn't matter to me because I'm boycotting all Hydros equipment, full stop. Do you know why?
They're not over here, are they?
Correct. So until they sell it over here, I'm not buying any of it. And I'm making a stand. And we do want it over here, by the way.
It's fine buying Jecod from China, but
well, I literally can't get hold of that stuff, of Hydro stuff. I think it looks really good. Anyway, especially the Maven, actually. So
come on, bring on the bread.
Yeah, another slice of bread, Ryan. And this is a picture. You'll like this. So there's a place in America called Cush Corals. You heard of Cush Corals?
I think I have actually, yeah.
I'd never heard of them. They found what Salem Clemens describes as one of the dankest discosoma mushrooms around.
I think I've seen that. I recognise that comment, yeah.
Yeah, it's called a purple Urkel discosoma mushroom. And let me just make that a little bit bigger. So I'm not really into mushrooms, but that's quite nice. That kind of looks to me. Doesn't do it for you, really?
No. It just
interesting.
No, I just thought That's all right. It looks there are much nicer mushrooms. You know, the jawbreaker mushrooms. That's
Okay.
what I thought. The jawbreakers. That looks like it's got some sort of like STD on
It does a
it.
bit. That
Yeah.
looks to me, that's kind of like a jack-o'-lantern leptoceras on steroids, but with these
Yeah.
purple, well, I guess they do look a bit like a purple STD.
Yeah.
I don't think it said the price, but I suspect it's going to be quite expensive because they're pretty unusual, to be fair. In the chat, do you like that or do you not like that? Do you hate it, love it, or hate it? I think that's cool. I'm surprised you don't like it, actually. Don't do it.
No, there's way nicer mushrooms than that, in my opinion. And that's
Oh,
almost,
yeah.
I don't know. I almost think that's kind of like someone's got a weird mushroom import and they've gone, look, this is something special, and everyone's going, yeah, it's special, but it's not nicer. So what makes it special than the fact that person said it was special?
It's unusual, basically, is what makes it special.
Yeah. Well, look, that's what's nice about this hobby. You don't have to, not everyone has to like everything.
No, this is true.
So,
You and I disagree on stuff all the time about what we do
true.
and don't like. Apparently, Hydros didn't ever give a date. Black Friday was wishful thinking from users.
Yeah.
Dan hates it. Jay's Reef hates it. Steve Webb hates it. All right, everybody hates it.
I feel like my opinion is usually the opinion of chat.
That's
what we learned when we did all the competitions.
Yeah, yes, it's true. I won one by, I think I won like, it was like 6-5 or something. It was really close still.
Yeah.
Very annoying.
It still hurts I lost that one.
Yes, it's only one a bloody one. Ryan, 2 hours. We've just gone past 2 hours.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you wanted to talk about tonight?
Nothing from me. So.
Nothing from you. Okay. Well, in which case, we'll be back next week. We may or may not do Week in Reefing or a version of it. And yeah, bye.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.